level of interim is politically unstable, and we need someone with good ideas and the right motives to make sure that our community, our UNT community, comes out the other side A-okay. And that's what I'm here to provide.
Candidate Dugaretti.
First and foremost, hello everyone. I really like to thank NGTV and Daily for being here and hosting this event. I would also like to thank my running mate for sitting up there, Armando Sanchez, and thank you guys for this. Come to the point of why I want to be president. I've been involved with UNT for the last 4 years and part of SGA for the last 4 years. First year as a committee member and 3 years as a senator. And I really understand student concerns, and I'm well involved with the student body and with many other orgs on campus. So that's one of the reasons why I want to be president. But I also want to be president to further UNT, especially in this kind of situation that we're in right now, with different organizations being shut down, with potential funding cuts, and also with the recent investigation from the DOE, the Department of Education. I really want to be here to spearhead UNT into a safer and more promising environment for all our students currently and incoming.
Candidate Carey, would you like 30 seconds?
Yeah, Dugaretti is correct. We're entering this time period where a lot of things are unsure and unstable, but SGA needs to be the backbone to hold together our community.
Second question is, how do you plan to gather thoughts of the student body as a whole and address issues that everybody cares about?
So with that, I would like to honestly do more marketing and tabling and also collaboration to kind of evaluate on that. When I say collaboration, I like to meet with other organizations and collaborate with them, go attend their events, attend their meetings to understand hands-on kind of what's going on there. I would also want to do a monthly president-to-president kind of town hall or dinner where all the student body presidents along with the SGA president are together and they can communicate with each other, they can voice their concerns, tell what they like, what they don't like, and just general tabling, promotions, flyers, and events and activities more on that marketing side.
SGA needs to be the backbone of the community, but we need to create an atmosphere where a community can't be formed. It's important that we go into those organizations and those fraternities and those departments and say, what is something that SGA can provide? How can we help you further your mission? It's important that we create this coalition, strong bonds, not just because we want something from them, but because it's better to stick together. He talked about, a town hall type thing, and town halls are good, but they're too structured, they're too formal. SGA needs to create that atmosphere where anybody can come in. Just say hey, people need to know that SGA is here for them and has the resources to point them in the right direction. Or if we don't have the resources, we can talk about it.
30 seconds ago.
And so for that, I would like to say, one of the things I mentioned earlier is that fraternities and sororities are overlooked often. So I would definitely want to get more involved with them and have a chat with their presidents and their members. But I also want to have open office hours where students are welcome to come in during those times at any point, just sit down with the president, the vice president, just be like, hey, this is happening, this happened, what can we do? So that way we have more of a one-on-one connection with students. It's just a chill, open environment.
All right, next question, first starting with candidate Carey. Question is, under this recent administration, a lot of work has been done. What is your main focus of improvement?
One, making sure that we're creating those coalition bonds. Without a community, nothing can be done. And in doing so, and sticking together, we can advocate for things like more on-campus housing, and increase student worker minimum wage, and put together more things, or better things, that help us advocate for the students. I talk about a Department of Advocacy in my policy platform, because there needs to be a piece of SGA that is specifically dedicated to their cause. It's good that we're all doing it, the one that spearheads that cause or those causes.
So in regards to that, my main policy goals are employee paid during university closures at the end of the semester, at the end of the year when the university is closed for 2 weeks. Student employee pay for those who are taking classes next semester, as many live paycheck to paycheck. But also mental health. It's one of the biggest concerns for students and one of the biggest reasons for dropping out of college or not getting their degree in time. It also what causes many students to not be able to interact with other students or join ARCs. So we really want to focus on mental health, work with CTS and other counseling organizations to better improve mental health so that way people are more involved on campus and there's more happening and they're able to get their degree on time and overall enjoy their experience here at UNT.
30 seconds.
Being in collaboration with these organizations and these departments should be the bedrock of whichever administration that students choose. Like I said, there is no going forward if the whole community is not going along with this.
Next question, starting. How did you decide which issues would be the foundation of your campaign?
So we spoke to multiple different students and organizations. We went to some of their meetings, and I spoke to students and friends of mine that are in organizations and a little bit of personal experience. And after doing all that evaluation and asking people, we decided on mental health and that because many people said, yeah, I mean, I can't do this degree or I can't do this class, and they were planning on dropping out or something like that. And we also spoke to many students who are reliant on themselves, and they said, yes, even though we have an on-campus job, not getting paid during the end of the year or even the current low. Sorry, there's a lot of feedback coming through. The current low wage is really hurting us.
Going out into these communities and discovering what their issues are or what they're dealing with or what some of their students say, it kind of helps you put in perspective what individual problems that students are facing. And my campaign policy, the Mean Green New Deal, addresses that. It talks about increasing the student worker minimum wage. It talks about advocating for more housing. It talks about making sure that these communities are the center front and that their issues, those key issues, are what is pushing SGA forward. Because SGA can't fight on an issue by itself. SGA can't advocate for an issue by itself. We need those communities to help push us forward, to give us ideas about what we're facing.
No, I agree with that point here. Yes, we definitely do need a community, but we also have to be really adaptable and understanding of everything because we're in an extremely ever-changing environment where rules and regulations are changing by the minute. So with all that in mind, it is a game of balancing out everyone and understanding kind of what people need and how to go about it.
This next question, starting with candidate Carey. What past experiences and qualities will help you succeed in this role?
First, I just want to respond to that. That's a good point. And my plan for Department of Advocacy, centering around the Advocate General, does exactly that. A centerpiece that pushes for the advocacy of our communities. But in terms of my experience, this past year, I've served as the election commissioner. I gave that up to run for president because I believed in some of these ideals that I'm talking to you about now. But before that, I was a transfer student. I came from Tarrant County College, South Campus. No? Okay, well. And I served as not only the parliamentarian of SGA, creating legislation and keeping up with the rules and regulations, as my opponent said, but also as the Black Student Union president. I was part of that community and pushing for some of those ideas and some of the things that we talked about, in our executive board meetings. So I'm experienced enough in lots of different roles in SGA.
Candidate Duguay.
So in terms of my experience, first of all, I'd like to say that's a well-built resume there. But in regards to my experience, I have been part of UNT for the last 4 years. Like I said, I've been part of SGA for 4 years, 2 years as a senator, but I've also been part of many other orgs. For a little bit, I did Mean Green Racing, a organization that builds a race car every semester, every year, and we go to Michigan to race it. And things always happen there. We have to fight challenges. But it's also part of ISA as event management, and it's one of the more stressful things to do because things always come up. And we've had many successful events and that I've spearheaded and that I've worked personally on in that regard. So that's one thing. But I've been part of student government throughout high school. I'm also an immigrant too, so I have first-hand experience in all of those struggles and stuff like that. And that's why our campaign is also called the START campaign, because we really do want to start new change and we want to be adaptable and tactful in what we do.
30 seconds.
There's already a lot to go off. We don't have to start anything. It's just pushing forward. It's just rising to the occasion, making sure that we're meeting the moment and meeting some of those communities where they're at.
Next question is, how will you create and foster an effective legislative body?
So, I would have there are a lot more ideas and coming through. Many of the senators here have many ideas but don't really know where to get started or who to talk to and are afraid to reach out to the higher official and stuff. So have more of a casual meetings with them or try to facilitate that where they can just come into the office, and the SGA could be where they meet with the vice president or the president to kind of facilitate those meetings and to help the students better reach out to these people and have more open office hours, and that way we can get more legislation and we can get more ideas flowing.
So my Mean Green New Deal has a project specifically for this. The current president and vice president have done an amazing job of trying to pass legislation and kickstart what we've got going on here. But I think we can go a little bit further. I think, making sure that the Senate is as available as it possibly can be. Because meeting once a week here in this room isn't enough. We need to have office hours, maybe even specifically in those colleges. We need to have the Senate moving around a little bit. Let's table outside of, the BLB or the GAB. Let's make sure that the committees that our senators are on are responding to specific issues with the student body, whether that be the public relations of SGA or the internal affairs of the organization, student welfare. Let's make sure that that committee has all of the resources that UNT provides and is always ready to disperse that information when asked. There is a lot that the Senate can do that is just not meeting its full potential, and I think my project Vanguard and the Mean Green New Deal can meet that moment, can meet those requirements.
So when I was part of Senate last year, we had committees that were in charge of doing this stuff, but a lot of times it was lack of communication, just admins and other people not responding back to us or giving us mixed or wrong information that heavily limited us, and we didn't have an easy way of reaching them because they wouldn't be in office or something like that. And that's why our START campaign really wants to spearhead a new way of meeting these people and interacting with these people, so that way we can get new legislation and better change for students.
We will now move into more specified questions for candidates. So with that, I will move to first a question for candidate Dugaretti. You have 2 minutes to answer. 1 minute and 30 to answer. Question is, you talk a lot about the financial challenges that students have on campus. How are you going to prioritize student financial aspects in your administration?
Our top priorities are the student financial aspect, but the one way we want to prioritize that is, I know one way we really want to start doing that is like I said, increasing student employment pay and stuff like that. And I do know with the current budget cuts, it is getting difficult to do that. And SGA and my administration is ready to take a pay cut if it needs to come down to that point to better facilitate students. We also want to talk with the university to get a better idea of where these funds are going and where we can cut back on these funds and kind of reduce some spending so that we can further improve on students. And if that needs to cut back on construction or large-scale improvement projects that may not be necessary at this moment, we are willing to do that for the sake of the students. And especially SGA is willing to take a pay cut for the sake of the students.
Yeah, I really like that. You know, if we're going to experience these dark times and a cut in our budgets, and not just SGAs, but across the entire university, we need to know where some of that money, the remainder of that money is going to go, and how it is going to be allocated for students. And SGA then needs to be able to sift through that information and disperse it to students. This is exactly where your money is going. This is where every cent is going. But I think in addition to that, we need to stand together as a community to take care of one another. You know, it takes a village, and it sure does. And so we need to make sure that we're holding each other accountable, and that includes the university.
So, like he said, you know, similar kind of what he said, kind of similar. He said similar to what I said, but to elaborate a bit more on what I said, I also want to see like the overall university budget. So kind of, you know, how much libraries is spending, how much is being spent on IT infrastructure, how much is being spent on campus improvements and stuff like that, not just SGA, to see where we can really cut back on that spending. I know the current administration is already cutting back on their spending, but we want to further do that.
Okay, next question for candidate Devereaux. Your campaign platform showcased three main issues as the foundation of your campaign, starting with students' mental health on campus. Could you provide us with some current statistics referring to the state of students' mental health and what you say is the link between lack of activities and a sense of community on campus?
For statistics, in the recent survey of, the total respondents on the survey were 608 people. This was done over the course of about 3-4 months at, you know, all UNT campuses. And in that, we found that the undergraduate female students were 38% more significantly impacted with mental health, and the highest like racial group that was impacted was Asians. Asians were impacted. 25% either delayed their graduation, and 11% said that it is extremely challenging to achieve what they want to achieve, so either dropped out or changed degrees. Males were at just 19%. A lot of these students also reported that mental health was causing relationship issues and family issues along with financial issues. These were from last semester.
Yeah, you don't need a survey to tell you that mental health is a major problem. You know, I think a lot of people on this campus, maybe in this very room, struggle with that. And I commend my opponent for wanting to address that issue. But I think what needs to happen there is we need to make sure that the resources the campus provides are beefed up and are advertised to students, because they are amazing services.
And to add on to what I said, undergraduates report a 45% overall mental health issues compared to only 25% with graduate. So it's significantly more, and for that we want to work with CTS and other mental health orgs on campus to bring that number significantly lower, so that way people can have an overall better healthy lifestyle.
Next question for candidate Carey. Question is, you have advocated for wide change and some would say shaking things up. What does that exactly entail?
I want to disagree with you. I don't think that's wide change. I think that's just necessary. Like I said, bringing us together as a community, making sure that we are talking to one another. It seems like no matter what SGA you ask, communication is a problem. Well, let's just try a little bit harder at it. Let's make sure that we're checking up on people. We're going into those communities. Let's make sure that advocacy is always a key and central part of what SGA does. You know, because it's not just play government. It's real things that affect students' lives. This union, the Paul Rec Center, was started because of stuff that SGA did. And that's important.
I agree with everything you said there. Yes, all this stuff started, but you know, in terms of major change, it's really not necessarily something that's possible. But you know, our campaign really does, like I said, we want to adapt to what we already have and further increase that instead of just re-changing everything. Because with the current stuff that's already changing, putting on that much pressure on everyone would just cause more things to go bad. So we want to be more adaptable and tactful in what we do than start doing major change.
That is not what I'm advocating for. I'm advocating for systems that are already in place to be beefed up. A Department of Advocacy is something that kind of sort of exists. We have an advocacy committee, but I know that they need a little bit more help. I know that they need more scope and more range. We already have an advocate general. They're just not being utilized. And so I'm advocating for the utilization of some of the things that we are already given.
Next question for candidate Dugrady. Addressing safety and security is highlighted in your campaign. How do you plan to gather student feedback about student safety concerns, and what will be the step after once that is collected?
So in regards to student safety concerns, again, attending more organizations and having open office hours is one big thing. But also one thing that we do is the campus safety walk every year. That's something I really still want to continue doing, but I also want to have more one-on-one meetings with the police department and campus safety advisors, because we've been getting a lot of emails and police alerts saying, oh, this happened, that happened, and kind of seeing where we can increase that. And a couple steps that we have in mind is more security cameras, more reachability, and overall more lighting and speed control and stuff like that, and a little bit of more increasing police patrolling at night times.
I think that's a really good policy. I think that SGA needs to reach out to these places where we are supposed to be secure and talk to them about how we can, what they're currently doing and how we can better do that. I think we all remember at the beginning of the year when there was some creep taking pictures of women at the Pole Rec Center. It's not acceptable, and I hope that the senator's plan would help address some of those issues.
It definitely would. We have, once that did happen, I did reach out to a couple of the police officers to see how that got through and kind of what happened there. And some of the information I got found some major loopholes that we have somewhat addressed internally, but for logistical reasons couldn't make it alive. The other thing I also really wanted to emphasize on is the amount of construction going around is also causing more issues for students in terms of safety and driving safety and walking safety. So something to address is letting students more aware of what's happening around campus, just not only on campus, and having a live interactive map or 24-hour support to understand what's going on.
My next question is for candidate Carey. There has been a lot of change within your campaign. How can you assure the voters that you can run a well-oiled machine?
Yeah, there have been a few problems, but that's because some people go in different directions because of personal reasons or whatever that might be, and I think it's perfectly fine, for them to go pursue what they want. It may not be with me, but I wish them the best. They are extremely important to me, and I will watch everything that they do, but at some point, I have to step back and let them do them. And I think that's a good quality in a leader, to let those people do them, what works best for them. I'm not gonna keep anyone here held on to my campaign because I want them to or because I need stability. I want you to go do you. But those issues are not the issues of the student body. Those issues aren't important. What is important is what I'm trying to offer students, what I'm trying to gauge from students. Collaboration, that inclusivity, those coalitions that we're trying to build. That's what's important. That's what students want to hear from, not what my campaign may or may not be doing.
I just want to say I've been through those hardships too, and I was lucky enough to I got everything sorted out now, and we're able to have a well-oiled campaign and now on track for a positive victory, hopefully. But students also do care about what's going on within the campaign, how well-oiled it is, and how well it's set up, and who your running mate and stuff are. And if those are not finalized well before election week, people won't have enough trust in you.
It kind of goes back to that mental health issue that my opponent was talking about. Part of that is just trying to let them go and do them. And students do care about what happens in my campaign, but it's not the key issue of this election.
Next question is, who is your current running mate, and can you explain the status of the appeal for your former vice president's eligibility.
So my current running mate is Jordan Harris. She is a communications major. Wonderful. I'm happy that she's on board. But in terms of the appeal process for my former vice president, I feel that no matter anyone's GPA, it is necessary that when people want to do the work, they're on the team. And she wanted to do the work, it's just that she wasn't allowed to be on the team. She'll hopefully take on in some other capacity, but I think it's important to let people who are willing and ready to do the hard work that we're talking about go out and do that, and whatever capacity they can try to take on.
Quick rebuttal to that is your running mate here right now, by chance?
Yes, in the back there.
Hello, just wanted to say hi, that's all.
Hey, Jordan.
The other thing too I want to say is that in terms of GPA, I understand they want to do the hard work, but why did their GPA ever get to that stage? You know what I mean? Like if it got there, that there's things that went wrong, and that's why that requirement exists. And I firmly believe that requirement should be there, and if anything, it should be increased so that we can have a higher, more qualified candidates running.
Senator, numbers don't make a person. The willingness and hard work that they want to do is what makes them. And now their GPA might have dropped, but her GPA might have dropped, but that's no indication to what kind of service she was willing to provide to the students.
And I totally understand that, and my GPA is also not the greatest of all. It is just a mere 2.0, but I do see.
Alright, we're gonna move on from that question, just so we can keep things a bit more civil and in line. 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Numbers don't make a person. I was a horrible student in high school, but here I am now, willing and ready to commit to you to do the work. Numbers have never made a person. Numbers on a page don't make a person. It is only what's in your heart and what is in your mind that you are willing to do.
All right, another question for candidate Carey. An item outlined in your campaign is raising the student worker minimum wage. What are you proposing that rate be raised to?
Yeah, I think that it's important that we look around to the surrounding areas of UNT and establish what the cost of living is. And in doing so, we can estimate what that number will be. Because I can't just say a number because it might be wrong. But I can say that SGA should look at the cost of living around UNT and possibly Denton and the surrounding other areas and cities and dictate, and that should dictate what that number shall be.
I agree with what he said. The cost of living on Denton has gotten much more expensive since I've joined here, and since many other students have joined, they've complained about that, and that's also why we are strongly advocating for a higher pay for students, with just the national average now being well above $10, with students just making a mere, at the average of $8. So we really do want to increase that, and we also really want to work on having more financial resources available for students and improving the quality of the food pantry and other resources so students don't feel stressed out and have to drop out because they can't afford it.
Right. It's important that because we're all facing those issues, that we come together on that issue and advocate to the university that we want a pay raise. I think NT Daily has done several stories about the cost of living in Denton and the types of housing that students need, that students will potentially have. And so it's important that SGA reassesses that, because that's what we need to be doing. And I think that's what a Department of Advocacy would be focusing on. Specifically, issues that impact students like that.
I also think there should be more discussions had with financial aid and money management services to see kind of what's going on with tuition and why, if there's any way we can alleviate that, and if we can do anything with students' fees to reduce those to, again, better help students. And that brings me to my initial point of bringing funding from one place to another and cutting back on expenditure to lower student fees and tuition so that they have a better opportunity to graduate and study here.
Okay, thank you. We're gonna move to student questions in the room, if we have any.
I'd love. Oh. No. Okay. First, I want to say, I know it's not easy being up there, so good job to both of y'all. I have a lot of questions, but I will ask a specific question for candidate Carrie. Hearing you speak throughout the night, you mentioned utilizing the Advocate General to accomplish some of your platform goals, if I remember hearing well. For those uninformed, can you explain what the role of Advocate General is within SGA, and can you describe in detail how you plan to utilize that position to your whatever you would like?
Yeah, so when I'm able to officially launch my campaign, my policy platform, the Mean Green New Deal, will be available for everyone to read. But the Advocate General in SGA's Constitution is specifically there to wrangle issues that arise within the Supreme Court, you know, as a sort of prosecutor or defense for SGA. It's a small role, and that's why it hasn't been utilized. But in utilizing those resources, I feel like we can go even farther with that position. You know, talking about them being head of a department. I mean, we just take the role of advocacy director and plop it in an advocate general, and we can go a little bit farther. They can have some more of those resources that we're talking about. And that's increasingly more important as SGA is about to have his budget slashed.
We're not about to have our budget slashed.
So on the advocacy general that you keep mentioning about, how do you plan on integrating this with everyone? Like, will they be the ones like marketing? Will they be the face of SGA? How do you plan on going forward with that? And how do you plan on recruiting people for that?
SGA has a system in place for recruiting people, but I talk about how the Senate needs to have a committee specifically dedicated to public relations and outreach. The executive board, the executive branch needs to have someone, and they do, who is specifically dedicated to outreach and communications. And that's what I would have for that. The Advocate General will be more behind the scenes, making sure that some of those issues that we've talked about tonight are being looked at or being researched or being looked into, to make sure that we're accomplishing a goal, to see what is feasible, what we can do and what we can't do.
I have a question for both candidates. You guys both mentioned that you want to collaborate differently with different student organizations. Could y'all give a specific example of how you're going to do that, with what org, and to do what?
So in regards to collaborating different roles, we really want to, again, UNT is a very diverse community with different people from all walks of life and all backgrounds and cultures and stuff. So we really want to, collaborate with a lot of the diverse organizations such as Black Student Association, Latin Student Association, or Muslim Student Association, just to name a few, so that we can kind of understand what their struggles are and where they come from. We also really want to collaborate with Discovery Pro because they are pretty neglected, and Frisco campus, when I went up there recently, they said, yeah, no one comes here from SGA, and we just don't get enough resources or representation. So we really do want to bring them together. And just by attending events and, having a more of a casual chat during these just fun, chill events, and just go up and talking to people and having open office hours for anyone to come by anytime.
After last year's federal election, I was kind of thinking what I could do here to create bonds and communities, and what some of those communities are and how I can bring them closer together. Because I feel like the Latin Hispanic Student Union doesn't really talk to the Black Student Union, and so I feel like something, whether that be an organization that I created or SGA, needs to be a backbone for some of these communities to be able to collaborate and talk to each other, push forward agendas like increasing the student worker minimum wage, because they represent a sizable population of students. And so it's important that we have their input and their perspectives on what they're doing, what they're thinking about doing, and things that they want to do but couldn't do without us.
Is there any other student questions at this time?
Okay, hi, this is for both of y'all. I was wondering about your legacy. What do you want your legacy as student body president to be?
I want my legacy to be one of building those coalitions. I think, like I mentioned, after the last election, federal election, it's something that I've become increasingly more passionate about, and making sure that views are being input that might not otherwise, especially as we go into these next 4 years, and making sure that we're here together and that we're fighting for one another, and no one is left out. No one is left out of this movement of just this community that we're trying to build, we're trying to piece together.
I agree with my point what he said, and that's why we've been trying to collaborate, interact more with other orgs so they're more inclusive and there's more diversity and a voice for everyone. But more than that, our research and legacy really wants to be is improving mental health and employee pay while the university is closed, whether planned or unplanned, as that will impact people for years to come, and even with direct impact right now for those who are in heavy financial hardships due to the ever increasing day-to-day life cost.
And I'd just like to add on to that. Neither of us will be here long enough to see that legacy. I know that anyone who enters this office will never be able to see that, but we at least want to start or accomplish something that knocks down those dominoes. So eventually some of the things that we're talking about do get done.
Hi, first off, congratulations to both of y'all for being up there. But my question is to both of y'all. What is y'all's plan to deal with conflict within SGA between members if it arises?
So conflict is very interesting. One, we should know better. But when we don't, it's important that someone is there to mediate that dispute, whether that be the president, whether that be the vice president, or whether that be the Supreme Court. If it comes to that, making sure that there are people in place that are specifically there to deal with that conflict, making sure that it can be resolved in a very professional manner.
I agree with what my opponent is saying, but we also would like to have a new committee called IA, or Internal Affairs, kind of who deals with issues like this and are a complete middle people who are leaning towards either side but aren't partisans. So their whole responsibility is for when things go wrong, they can talk to them before it has to be escalated to whether the Supreme Court or has to go higher up. But in scenarios like that, it would really be case by case and kind of what the conflict is. If it's a small thing, the IA can handle it. If it's more like an election code violation, at that point it would be a Supreme Court thing. Or if it's a very major thing that impacts every student, then the president and the university admin staff would get involved.
Hi, so this is a question for both candidates. I was wondering, in what specific ways do you plan on aiding those diverse organizations that were affected by either budget cuts or legislation which caused them to shut down?
So in that, we always stand by students. We believe in diversity and we believe in inclusivity. We want everyone to strive and we want everyone to be included and happy. So we always stand by students. In terms of what happened with orgs, we will try to reinstate them and bring them back up as much as we can. But it is a balancing act between the students' interest and federal laws and regulations as to not get UNT shut down. But we will always be there for the students, and our first priority will be the students, and we are for the students.
First, we need to ask them what they need. We can't impose any will upon them. What we can do is ask them what they need and how we can help provide that for them, how we can help further what they're trying to do. Because we can't impose anything on anyone, and I feel like that's even more of a reason to have community. At TCC, it was a little bit smaller than UNT, but we were sort of this small community, and we were able to ask each other for stuff we might not have done otherwise. because we're part of that small, tight-knit community. And I feel like striving for something like that here would go a long way, making sure that, we're doing stuff out of the kindness of our hearts, because they're our community members, because we depend on them, and we know that they would do the same for us.
And after this question, we will have one more from the audience.
This question is for the START campaign. One of your initiatives is campus safety, and you said you want to do this by adding more lighting or more security cameras to campus. While this may be a City of Denton issue or like a UNT infrastructure issue, how do you plan to ensure that you would still fulfill this initiative?
So anything that happens on the UNT campus is a UNT issue. Denton doesn't really have much of a say in how many lights we have or how many cameras we have, hence why we have our own police department and stuff. So we would have to communicate more with them and communicate with IT infrastructure leaders and facilities to see where we can add those cameras and what the feasibility with that would be and how well they would work. In terms of the surrounding area around campus would be a Denton issue, and for that we would have to speak with the sergeant or the head of the police department and the mayor to get that going. They did have the discussions last time and certain progress was made, but again, due to some budget cuts and federal and state regulation, things had to be pushed back a little bit. We hope to spearhead those and get those completed.
I'd just like to say that it's even more so imperative that we come together as a community so we can go to the city of Denton and advocate for some of those issues. Because if SGA just goes alone, and although we are representatives of the student body, it's better to have the backing of the student body. It's better to have talked to the student body about those issues and then go forward from there.
So, like you said, when we do the campus safety walk and we do the campus safety initiation, we are first interacting with students to see what they want. The lights and cameras were something that many students did suggest in the past, and we're like, yes, that would really help. It is way too dark at night to walk. Class gets out at 8 o'clock, sun's already gone, we can't see anything. So we already did speak to students, and we will continue doing that to get more insight and slowly, keep giving that information to Denton and UNTPD to further improve that cost.
Final question from the audience.
This question is for both candidates. There's been mention about willing to cut pay from SGA for the betterment of the undergraduate student body, and there's also been continuous mention of open office hours. My question is, what is the structure of the two with pay, time commitment, and work in mind?
So with the pay, yes, I do agree SGA does already get a low pay, and it is not something that we really want to do, but if it comes down to that, we are willing to do that, and our administration is ready to even volunteer our time if need be, because we are here to help the students. We want to be with the students, not, we're not doing this for a paid thing, we're not doing this for some benefit, we're doing this because we like what we do and we want to be here for the students. So, if it comes down to me and my running mates or president and vice president, we're ready to volunteer our time while, our other staff who are supporting us get paid. And in terms of office hours, doing regular working hours or even coming in off work hours to just be in my office to have people stop by and talk to me, would be more than happy to do that. Like I said, we're always here for the students.
It's important that we're all in this together, and my plan is to make SGA the backbone of this proposed coalition. But in doing so, we need to be strong. We need to make sure that our convictions are strong. And our budget, our pay for some of our student employees is widely important because it's hard to volunteer your time. And so we need to make sure that you guys are supported in whatever we do, because without you, none of this would be working right.
Right, so mic isn't working, but
you have to flip it on.
Okay. Now is it working? Yeah, it is. All right. So now we will move to somewhat of closing statements or the final question, first being answered by candidate Carey under the question of why are you the right candidate?
Like I said at the beginning, we are entering a moment, and there are times when you don't choose the right leader for the moment. And I I think we're entering that time. And so it's important that you choose someone who is willing to advocate, who is willing to build those communities, who is willing to have the right conviction, and someone who knows what's right, knows what's right in their heart, and to follow through on that, because we need a leader who does that. And in doing that, we come out stronger on the other side.
Candidate Dugarity?
So, who you guys said the right candidate is really up to you, but to say why I feel that why our administration feels we're right is this is something that we've been planning since last year internally, and policies and what we can do and how we can do things. We've been talking to students, we've been getting info, we've been gathering insight and kind of talking to administration and admins on what's going on, and we've been keeping up very well with current affairs and figuring out possible outcomes and solutions, and preemptively thinking of things that might happen, such as budget cuts or stuff, and how we can prepare for that. So it's been going on since well into last year and more from last summer. So that's one thing, and also both of us have vast experience with student government and government in general. I come from a background of politics, as does my running mate, so we understand how hectic and how crazy it can get, and we're willing to put our time and our effort, whatever comes our way, and stand there for the students.
And final 30 seconds.
Bold, be brave. During this election season, make sure you look, at our policy platforms and try to differentiate between the two, because we agree a lot, about community building, about safety and increasing pay for workers. But try to see what makes us different a little bit, because I think that's the key here, to what we plan on doing and where our priorities lie.
All right.
Not me to do that. Did not mean to do that. But yeah, this is an exciting moment. I think that was a very good debate between the two of you. I think we got really awesome questions from all the audience. So just finally, I would have to say thanks once again. Thank you to the people right next to me, the candidates that you had to choose from for this next election. Thank you to the correspondents from the election board and to NC Daily. Thank you to the rest of NC Daily, of course, for setting up all of the infrastructure and technology that I see in front of me. Thank you to the audience for coming here, putting an hour of your time aside to get, some nice words from your candidates, maybe some pizza as well. That's probably the secondary one though, right? And then thank you to the people watching at home, right? Everyone from UNC, really. We understand that we each have a sort of responsibility after this. We have the decision to make between the two parties that are brought to us today. And what we would do now is heed their words, understand that, we all want students to benefit. No one in this room hopefully is malicious, and then we would all wish each other a good day, right? So, have a good day.
Let me just ask you a question. Where can the people find this?
Well, of course, you can find it on the SGA website. In the elections tab, you'll see a link that is throughout the list of hyperlinks talking about the code and the violation report form. You'll see something that says vote now. It's going to open on the 24th of March, and that's going to be the next Monday at 8 a.m. until the 27th of March, which is Thursday at 5 p.m. So you have the whole week to decide. You can watch back the video even if you like. Make sure you jot the notes down. But yeah, just make sure you have a really good thought out answer at the end, and hopefully this was worth your time.